Hello and welcome to Center Ice Cardcast, your one-stop podcast shop for all things hockey cards. My name is Eric Andrews, also known in the hobby as Hammerhawks. I'm joined by my co-host and fellow hobbyist Aaron Goldstein, better known throughout the hobby as Crease Collector. So just to start things off for the episode, I wanted to share a quick little story about a pretty awesome random act of kindness that I experienced recently. So just to give the shout out right up front, giving a huge shout out to the one and only Joe Reinwald. His username on Hobby Insider is Weasel King, so some of you might know him that way. But Joe and I have kind of messaged back and forth over the years. He has a little bit of a Jacob Slavin collection himself, and just over the years, we've kind of gone back and forth. Like, oh, what have you picked up recently? What do you have? Stuff like that. And I think like a few years ago on Hobby Insider, we were talking, and I think I just said like, "Hey, like, what all do you have in your collection? Like, I'd love to see what you have." And so I don't know if he sent me like just a list or a photo album or whatever it was, and I was like, "Okay, yeah, like there's some cool cards in there for sure." He had a few at that point that I still needed, and was like, "Okay, like cool. At least I know where some of them are," and didn't think much of it. And then a few weeks ago, we were talking on Facebook about the Slave Golden Treasures card, actually, that has been mentioned a few times on the show now. And he was actually in on the bidding on that. So we were just kind of talking a little bit about that. And then I was like, oh, like, remind me what all you have again, because I know we've talked about it before, but I don't remember. So he sent me a list of what he had. And I kind of looked through it, and there were a few cards that I was like, oh, yeah, like these would be of interest to me. So I just said like, hey, like, I don't know if you would consider moving anything. If you would, these are cards that I would be interested in. And he was like, yeah, like, I guess I've never really thought too much about selling any of it just because I collect them. He doesn't like super collect them or anything, but just like cards that he finds interesting and cards that he likes, he'll grab them. So there were a few cards. He had a few Upper Deck High Gloss cards, which I collect multiple copies of. One of the few cards that I will pick up multiple copies of for my players when I see them. And then he also had pretty much the one card from his list that I would say is something that I actually needed, meaning that I didn't already have, was a 2015-16 The Cup Upper Deck Premier Cyan Printing Plate Auto 1 of 1. Obviously being a 1 of 1 that he had meant I don't have it, of course. And so obviously when I was making my list of the few cards that he had that I would be interested in, I listed that one, just thinking like I'm just putting it down just because, who knows. So he was like, okay, yeah, like those are some good cards you asked about, like haven't really thought about moving anything, but cool. And so I was like, okay, yep, like if you ever want to move something, let me know and I'll certainly be interested. So then he responded to that just saying like, well, how about this? I don't really want to like move anything, but I know that you're a very dedicated slave and collector and that you are as good of a home for these cards as there is. So out of that list of cards that you put together, which I want to say was probably like 4 or 5 cards in total, just pick one of them out and it's yours. I'll send it to you free of charge. You can just have it. So I was like, whoa, like, okay, that's very generous, obviously. Certainly didn't have to do that. So knowing that, there were whatever 4 or 5 cards that I had on the list, and I had all of them other than the printing plate, I said, well, if you're willing, obviously I love the printing plate just because that's one I obviously don't have. But that said, obviously it's also the most valuable out of all of these. So if you don't want to do that, I totally understand. No obligation, no pressure whatsoever. Totally up to you. And he was like, nope, like that's perfectly fine. Like I said, knowing that it's going to a good home, makes it worth it for me. So if that's the one you want, it's yours. So obviously I was just floored by the generosity there. And, he stuck up to it and sent it my way. And I got it a week or two ago. And yeah, it's an awesome card, obviously being a 1 of 1, but then also a printing plate, a signed printing plate at that, which you don't see super often, especially back then. That was just starting to be a thing right around those years. Prior to that, they were not signed. So yeah, just really cool and obviously quite the gesture on his behalf. And I was looking at my Slave and checklist when I got the card, and For his rookie year printing plates, he only had printing plates for SP Authentic, the Cup, Upper Deck Ice, Upper Deck Premier, and then his Young Guns card. He did have a few other rookie cards that year, but the printing plates weren't released for whatever reason. So he just has printing plates for those 5 sets. And by getting this Premier plate, that gives me at least half of all 5 of those sets. So that was just kind of a neat little tidbit there too. Being able to get the second of the 4 Premier printing plates was obviously, certainly really nice for me. And yeah, just wanted to obviously give Joe a huge shout out, just because that was obviously a very, very generous thing for him to do, to take something out of his personal collection that he had zero intention of ever moving, just so that it could be in my collection. That obviously meant the world, and it's certainly a card that will not be going anywhere anytime soon. So, Joe, if you're listening, thank you again so much. Really do appreciate it. And yeah, I think that's all I have to say. I know, Aaron, when I told you about it at the time, you were pretty surprised by it too.
Yeah, I mean, it's always cool hearing collectors helping out other collectors, like that's what it's all about. And I think we mentioned that a little bit on our last episode, actually. If you haven't listened to that yet, definitely give it a listen. But yeah, it's just so cool to see, especially a guy who also collects the same player in some capacity, just taking a look at his own cards and being like, you know what, like this is a cool collection. It'll still be a cool collection, like even after minusing, this piece or that piece, and just giving a nice new home to a card that will definitely be enjoyed by yourself. And that plate fact that you just alluded to is pretty cool. Having at least half the run from all his sets that had a plate in it is really, really cool. Hopefully one day you can create, a nice double rainbow or something like that. For those who don't know what that is, it's pretty much, at least one copy of each of the parallel cards from the set. And then when it comes to printing plates, having all 4 plates that go with the card. So just a double rainbow from both sides there, which is pretty cool. Yeah, definitely an awesome card for yourself, and a really sweet story about hobby generosity. So I guess that's a little reminder for all of us to pay it forward. And with that, we're going to move on to our main topic of the episode, which is a little countdown for our most wanted PC cards. I really enjoy hearing lists like this because, like we talked about a little bit pre-show, there's so many angles, you could approach a top 5 list of, the cards that we need for our collections. And we'll probably mention this at the end, but if you have a most wanted card yourself you want to mention, feel free to let us know. It's always cool to hear about what cards you need and, how that is going. So I'm going to start this off with my top 5. Number 5. It's actually, I'm going to cheat for like the first part of my list. So it's actually 2 cards, but you'll see why in a minute, how it kind of makes sense. At least I think they're 2 cards. They might not even be real, but I'm going to talk about them anyway. So in 0910 OPG Premier, there was a subset with a triple autograph set of a few players, and Enroth was in 2 of these cards. One was with Grant Fuhr, Ryan Miller, and Enroth, and the other was Lundqvist, Gustafsson, and Enroth as well. So those are the 2 cards. And the interesting thing was, I just found this out this week, doing a little bit of research on some of the cards that I still need. And this little thing just, caught my attention for whatever reason on the want list. And I decided, you know what, I'm just going to look up these for a little bit because I don't think I've seen one. And the weird part is, like for this set, it had a parallel card, the gold version, which was out of 5. And the base versions for these triple autos were out of 15. And what makes this so weird is that I found a checklist for this set that didn't have these 2 cards listed, because over the years, a checklist for this set has been kind of really unreliable for whatever reason. So I didn't see these listed, which is fine. Obviously, I know that these cards in the set exist, but what caught my attention was, a little note on this checklist that I had found that pointed towards that some of the cards from this set in the triple autograph set, along with the quad autograph set, didn't have certain parallels created for whatever reason. So in the triple autograph set, sometimes the gold version out of 5 was the only card that existed. And in other instances, the base version out of 15 is the only card to exist, and they didn't have a gold out of 5 for whatever reason. So again, like, although my card wasn't listed on this checklist, it still, begs the question of, if I have both the out of 5 versions and haven't seen the out of 15s, do they even exist? So, over the years, I just assumed, oh, well, they'll show up eventually. I've never seen a picture of them, but I'm sure they'll show up. I have the out of 5 versions, but this little stat here kind of makes me wonder, were they ever made? Or were they lost or something like that? And were they ever distributed in some way? Who knows? Who really knows? So they may exist, they may not. And it's just a cool little fun fact. So, for the OPG premiere set that year, for the triple autograph set, I guess now they're a most wanted, like as of this week, they're up there on some of my most wanted cards because they're kind of artificially rare for some reason. So, and like I said, I have the gold out of 5 versions. So just a weird thing that's going on with this set for whatever reason. So that's my number 5. I know it was kind of long-winded and filled with random numbers and stuff, but hopefully that made a little bit of sense. And I know there's a couple set collectors out there of this set, so it might be of great use to you.
Yeah, it's interesting just kind of even like hearing the context for those cards because, and I know this is something we've talked about, I think even on the show before, but kind of right around that era, quote unquote, the late 2000s, early 2010s, there was just kind of like a lot of instances like that where you didn't necessarily know if a card existed or not for whatever reason, or, if it did, it might not have followed, kind of the existing quote unquote rules of how things worked or, whatever it might be, and I do know that that was fairly common back then that a card might only have one version and not another or whatever it might be, so that's definitely interesting. Hopefully at some point you get a concrete answer on that one way or the other, but yeah, definitely interesting. And obviously if you do ever track down those cards, if they exist, those would be really nice cards for your collection, especially I mean, I know you really liked Jonas Gustafsson back at that time, so even just for that fact alone, that would be a cool card to have.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when I acquired the gold version of that card, with Lundqvist, Gustafson, and Enroth, I mean, like that's a really cool card for my collection too. Like PC aside, like around that time, I think other Leaf fans could, band together with me on this. Gustafson was a huge free agent signing at the time, and he was kind of like the next one, and that would carry Toronto to that next level. It never happened, obviously, but just the hype around him was really cool. So it's definitely a cool card for my collection, and hopefully I can find the base version someday. But we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. So my number 5 kind of goes back a little bit to something you were saying earlier in the show, that being Ryan Dezingel's 2015-2016 The Cup SP Authentic Cyan printing plate 1 of 1. That being because it is the only one of the 4 that I do not have. So if I'm able to ever find and acquire that card, then that will complete the rainbow of the printing plates for me. And I do have just his normal Future Watch and Future Watch Limited numbered out of 25 from that year. So that would be the double rainbow for that card, which would be awesome. Kind of somewhat interesting. I've actually seen it, and it was posted on Facebook for sale, and the guy was just like really difficult to deal with. Like he just was not, he was terrible at communicating. So it was just a pain just even trying to get him to acknowledge me. But then yeah, was just being really difficult about it. And I was making very fair offers. I mean, I think for his other 3 plates, I probably paid, whatever, $20 or $30 each for them. And I think I offered as much as like 75 or $100 for the thing because I was like, I need this card. Like this is the last one I need. I got to have it. I'll overpay for it. I don't care. Like I need the card. And he just would not even like acknowledge it. And then after a while, and like I would kind of like pester him about it like every week or so, whatever, just trying to get some sort of anything from him. And he just would not acknowledge me. And then, like, I don't know, maybe a couple months later or something, he messages me back and says, oh yeah, like sorry, I sold it. And I was like, what? Like what do you mean you sold it? Like who would have paid more for it than me? Like that doesn't make sense to me. Like what do you mean? And he was like, yeah, like I sold a bunch of stuff to a friend of mine, so he has it. And I was like, oh, okay, like cool. Can you give me his contact info so I can get a hold of him? And he was just like, no. And I was like, okay, can you pass along my contact info to him? No. Okay, can you ask him if he would be willing to move it? Yeah, I guess. I'm like, okay. And then I don't even remember what happened after that, but essentially nothing. So the card's out there somewhere. Some random dude that's friends with a moron has it. And yeah, so it's out there. Whether or not I'll ever see it again, I don't know. Maybe I'll dig back through my Facebook messages and see if I can find the original dude and see if I can badger him into getting me in touch with the guy. But so yeah, I it's kind of funny. It's a one of one that I actually have seen. So, who knows if I'll ever track it down for a second time and be able to acquire it. But yeah, that's my number five. Keep in mind the one of one theme for me is going to run strong throughout the rest of the show, just kind of the nature of it, not intentional. But yeah, this is one of one that I've actually already seen. So figured that since it was kind of like it's still like a card I really, really want, but don't know necessarily how realistic it is to ever get it since I have already seen it and didn't get it. So that's kind of why it's at number five instead of maybe potentially being a little bit higher on the list. Because obviously I would love to complete the complete set of the four printing plates, obviously. So yeah, that's my number five.
Yeah, I mean that card is definitely a big one for sure, especially when it's extra frustrating when the communication breaks down like that. It's very, very frustrating. And hopefully you can acquire that card one day. It's one thing, and we say this a lot, if you have a card, it's totally fair to do whatever you want with that card, whether it's keep it or sell it to someone, even someone and give them a fair price for it. That's totally fine. But for them to not pass on the contact information and let the communication just kind of die like that, it's very, very frustrating. I've had that happen myself, and it's not a fun situation to be in. So hopefully you acquire that card one day. Times like these I've seen down the road, especially if they don't care about the player or sport as much. Usually they'll get maybe sold off and then pieced out. So hopefully that happens one day with this card and you can acquire it for your collection, because getting the double rainbow would be extra cool. Next up on my list for the most wanted countdown here, actually, side note, this kind of feels like the game Need for Speed Most Wanted. If anyone's ever played it back in, I don't know when it came out, but I want to say PS2. So for those gamers out there who played Need for Speed like I did, keep that speed going. Anyway, number four, 2012 13 Upper Deck 300 Win Club memorabilia card. Now I'm only going after the jersey cards for this set, but the Belfour is just ridiculous. The odds on this thing, get this, are 1 in 16,605 packs, which is just unreal. And it's just a simple looking jersey card, nothing fancy, but for whatever reason, they were very, very short printed. And I kind of like that. It's frustrating as it is to see one for sale, and they constantly go for hundreds of dollars each. Definitely way over my budget. It is cool to see simple jersey cards have that appeal. I kind of wish they brought that back. And it's not like it's an old set either. It's from 1213, which definitely was in this modern age of printing so many jersey cards. So I kind of like that they did that. And we were talking about pre-show as well, that we kind of wish that jersey cards were kind of rare again, and then they actually meant something instead of usually going into like the dollar bin or something at shows. So Upper Deck managed to make these cards. I believe the whole set was, I think, case hits, I want to say. And so for these group A's, they were just unreal. So the Belfour, for whatever reason, they just did not make a lot of them. And so 1 in 16,000 or so packs. So I don't think I'll ever get it, but hey, it's definitely on the long list for a reason. I should also note that I need the Kiprasov from this set as well. I think he's just a Group B or something, but either way, it's a very tough card to find as well. And just yeah, it does not come up for sale often, so I need that one as well to hopefully get as close as possible to the set at least. I really enjoy those cards. So hopefully the Belfour shows up at a reasonable price or something, or someone gives me a wicked deal, but we'll see what happens. But it's definitely a most wanted card for sure.
Yeah, the odds of that card are just nuts. I mean, you very rarely hear odds that are that long. So, yeah, whenever you hear that, it definitely piques your attention and just a cool card, even just for that fact by itself. But knowing that obviously you were a big Belfour fan back in the day yourself, and working on this set too, obviously it makes for quite the card for you to be going after for all these years. So hopefully one day you can track that and the Kiprasov down so that you can finish your set off. Moving on to my number four, and I'm going to do kind of like number 4A and 4B for this one because they're similar in the sense that they have basically the same explanation. So those being the Jacob Slavin 2015-16 The Cup Black Shield 1 of 1 and his 2015-16 Premier Platinum Blue Spectrum Auto 1 of 1. So why those two cards? I mean, obviously the Shield speaks for itself. That's arguably his biggest and best card ever made. Certainly at least from his rookie year, probably between that and just the Black Auto 1 of 1 that I do already have. So that's an amazing card just in its own right. And then the Platinum Blue Spectrum I'm throwing in there as well because those are the only two of his rookie year cards that I do not have outside of printing plates, I guess, like I alluded to earlier. But just for pack inserted cards, those are the only two that I don't have. And I've yet to see either one of those cards. So who knows? I mean, I assume that they do exist. I don't have any reason to think they don't. But yeah, haven't seen them yet. So if I ever do see them, I'll obviously make a very, very strong play to make sure I get them. But yeah, definitely, should I ever find either of those will be cornerstone level type of cards for the Slavin collection for sure, especially the Shield. So pretty self-explanatory for those two. So that's pretty much all I have to say about those.
Man, I feel really bad for any collector going after pretty much anything now in that 2015-16 year because since the hobby has exploded, and even back then in 2015, people just hoarded McDavid stuff or anything that could possibly have McDavid in it. That includes boxes, cases, probably multiples of each in every product, honestly, especially the cup. Especially the cup. So for you to find anything in any of those products is just, it makes it that much more harder. So those two cards are huge cards obviously for your collection. And we spoke about this when you acquired the black 1 of 1 parallel, that it's just one of those ones where you'd be lucky to find at all, just for the fact that McDavid is in the same set, potentially in the same box. Like you'd never really know. So yeah, just unreal cards, and hopefully you get it because of that just crazy McDavid rookie year scenario. Similar stuff I'm sure happened 506, but I'm sure just not to the magnitude that we saw with McDavid and people just hoarding product like crazy. I think that eventually you will find these cards, but man, someone's going to be paying a lot of money to find them. So, which is I guess maybe good and maybe bad. So we'll see. But yeah, definitely some great cards for sure. Next up on my list is the 2010-2011 Panini Score French back. So these ones, if you've been around the hobby as long as we have, you probably have heard about these cards, or if you're a player collector like us, have just thrown yourself out the window and back up the stairs and out the window again, trying to look for these cards because they will drive you insane how crazy these cards are. The print run is unknown, but apparently a Panini rep from back in the day, I believe it was the Expo, alluded that he could count the amount of these cards on one hand. So I assume there's 5, but there could be 3. You never know. But so 3 to 5, probably 5. But either way, the parallel is unbelievably hard to spot because they have a tiny little sentence on the back written in French, and it's like I forget what it says, but it's like, thanks for collecting score hockey or something like that. I forget what it says. But anyway, so a little small thing in French text and just unbelievable. So yeah, I mean, it's a really fun little parallel, but man, it's like impossible to find. I mean, score is a very low end set, and that parallel, like I said, is just very, very hard to spot. And yeah, it's one of those ones that could get lost in a deck of cards forever. And I still need it for my collection. Eric had two at one point, which is just extremely just frustrating. Like, how? But anyway, that just makes me so mad, in a fun way. So Eric, hats off to you. You still have one in your collection, which is awesome. Never get rid of that thing because you will not find another. I had one at one point of Luongo, but I gave that to a Luongo collector, Chris, who we've had on the show. Yeah, I mean, just crazy stuff for sure. So the Panini Score Frenchback will forever haunt my dreams, and it sits on number 3 on my list. So thanks, Panini.
Yeah, those are, I know, very frustrating for a lot of people. As you alluded to, I had no issue finding that card from a Jalmerson collection. I got one pretty quickly and then actually found a second one fairly shortly after the fact as well. So I had two at one point.
I think myself and half the listeners are just hating you right now for that in a nice way, but still.
Yeah.
Fun story though.
Yeah. And I think I was just like, I don't really need two of these. So I sold one of them. Not that I regret selling it, but it would kind of be cool to have another one because those are the only two that I've seen. Yeah, I feel like 5 is kind of like the print run that a lot of people kind of work under, but knowing just how tough it is to spot, like you said, they might as well basically do one of ones because it's like trying to find a needle in a haystack. I pulled up a scan of mine, and on the back it says, "Don't forget to collect score hockey cards" in French, but that's what it says. Yeah, and like you said, it's super small. You have to really be looking for it to notice it. Knowing that Score was a cheap low end product that was heavily opened by kids and stuff, who knows? I mean, yeah, maybe 5 of them were made, but how many of them are actually in the hands of people that know what they are? 1, maybe 2. I mean, they're just, yeah, it's
And
impossible.
they were like unannounced as well. Like Panini didn't come out and say these exist. They were just sort of things that were discovered, and eventually they did cave and say, oh well, yeah, there's I can count on one hand the number of them that there are, but I'm not going to tell you more than that. Like that was kind of the response from the Panini rep back in the day, I heard. So unannounced as well, which is just
maybe one day you'll find one. But yeah, definitely an extremely tough and frustrating card for player collectors who have those on their checklist for sure. Moving on to my number 3, changing things up a little bit here. It's not a one of one, it's not of one of the main players that I collect, but it is a card that I very much would love to have and certainly plan on acquiring one at some point. Just kind of a matter of time and finding the right copy for the right price. That being one of the 2000-2001 Be a Player memorabilia, George Vezina pad memorabilia cards. And not just any of them, but the V16 card, which is the one that just shows Vezina himself. It does not show a second goalie who won the Vezina trophy as well. So for those who are not familiar with that set, V1 through V15 all feature a Vezina trophy winning goalie. So you have guys like Patrick Waugh, Dominic Hasek, all those kinds of guys pictured on the card along with Vezina, and then it has a piece of Vezina pad in the card. But the V16 is just Vezina on his own. So, to me, the ones that have the other goalies on them, yeah, they're cool. And they're obviously very historically significant cards just because they were the first Vezina memorabilia cards. And, yeah, some of the combinations, like especially Patrick Waugh being a Canadiens goalie, like that's really cool. But just kind of like the dual player that only features Vezina memorabilia, like that doesn't appeal to me quite as much because like it obviously is a Vezina card and a Vezina memorabilia card, but then it's kind of highlighting the other player more. So they just never really appealed to me all that much. But the V16 is one that I would definitely love to have in my Vezina collection for sure. Obviously I don't like super collect Vezina or anything by any means, but I kind of have like a maybe not like necessarily a list of things that I'm trying to find, but just like I'm very selective with the cards of him that I do have and that I want. So everything that I have and everything that I will chase moving forward has a specific purpose. It's not just, oh, that's a cool card, I'm going to get it. So I would say that this is one that is probably atop that list for sure. In fact, I would say it's probably the only Vesna card that's like I specifically want that card. There are some like I would love to have like a card that has a piece of Vesna skate blade on it, but I don't necessarily have like a specific this exact card that I want that has that because I think there are a few of them out there. So that's like a general type of card that I want to get for him. But the V16 is a specific card of his that I really, really want one day. Ideally, I would love to have a copy that has leather instead of cloth. If it has stitching or really nice wear, even better. Obviously, you can't be super picky with them. They are pretty tough to find. The rumor is that there's only 20 copies of them. So, they're very tough cards, especially over 20 years later. But they do pop up from time to time. So I mean, it's certainly doable. It's kind of more just a matter of when, and what the price point would end up being on it. But yeah, definitely an iconic card for sure, and one that I would love to have. And yeah, definitely a card that I plan to get at some point. Just kind of a more of a matter of when instead of if, like the rest of the cards on my list.
Yeah, that card definitely is a big card. I mean, for how old it is and just obviously the significance of it, like being the first Vesna memorabilia card. I mean, like I know it's number 16 in the set, but honestly, like if you really think about it, that was probably like I'm digging really deep here, but that was probably like the first mock-up of, a George Vesna memorabilia card. Like if I'm designing a set, I have this layout and it's like, all right, I'm gonna have Vesna in it. And then you'd think that the natural progression would be maybe like, okay, let's have other Vesna winners on this card too. So it's like that could be like maybe the first Vesna card, like I don't want to say created, but maybe like thought of or something like that. I mean, I guess you'll never really know, but I mean, it's just a really cool card. The first standalone Vesna memorabilia card of just him, just a really, really cool card. I believe I've seen that card before, but I mean, it's just obviously so rare and so hard to find. And you're being pretty modest because your Vesna collection is pretty awesome. And, a couple pieces in there are just amazing. So hopefully you acquire that card one day. It's gonna be a challenge, but I think it's one that eventually you'll acquire for sure. So yeah, it's gonna be awesome when you do. I'm sure we'll dedicate an entire Vesna episode towards that one card. It's gonna be really cool. Next up on my list is you guys have probably heard me talk about it a little bit before. It might surprise you being this high up on the list at number 2, but it is the 2014-2015 MVP gold script of your favorite goalie that I collect, Jonas Roth. So the card is out of 100, but these cards were a retail exclusive. So you got one of these gold script cards, one per box. And yeah, I mean, like a lot of low end products, you don't see a lot of the uncommon players like this. You usually see like the stars like Crosby, Ovechkin, stuff like that, and the legends if they're in the set. But for the other type of players, not really that much. I've seen a couple listed over the years, just kind of missed out on it. So they're out there, but people never really list cards from this set too much. And yeah, it just eluded me for whatever reason. And hopefully one day I can track it down. Definitely, it's definitely frustrating seeing a card out of 100 on the want list, but similar to the original MVP parallels, they can hang around on a want list for quite a while. So hopefully it doesn't take too long, but it's been a couple of years now. So I would really like to acquire that card one day.
For sure. Yeah, and that's another one kind of going back to the French back that I was much more fortunate with that card. I pretty quickly found the Jalmerson 14-15 MVP gold script out of 100, and just never really thought much of it. It was like, yeah, it's a retail parallel numbered out of 100. I got one. Cool. Whatever. And then, fast forward to whatever it was, 2020 or something, when we did our White Whale episode. And, that's obviously one that you mentioned. And, it made me just kind of realize how tough some things like that can really be. pretty much just because of that retail factor. A lot of the time, at least back then, I guess, retail was being opened by kids. And again, a low end product. And yeah, they're out there, but how many of them are in the hands of people that know what they are? Probably not very many. So yeah, I mean, it's a surprisingly tough card, and one that I'm certainly glad that I don't have to find all these years later. And funny enough, after we had discussed back in 2020 that you still needed that card, a second copy of the Jalmerson popped up on eBay, and I think I got it for like literally $2 or something. And I know you absolutely hated me when I told you that I had gotten the second copy of it for
Just
next to nothing.
rubbing salt in the card wound. I mean, just rubbing salt in it. But I really enjoyed that you picked another one up. Definitely cool cards. And it's funny you mentioned that because, it sometimes takes years, especially if you buy a couple cards, like maybe in bulk, or, you buy out a collection or something like that. It might take you a couple of years to really realize like what you have, and just, yeah, it just like I've experienced that where I haven't really paid too much attention on certain cards, and then years later go back and kind of realize like, wow, like this card is rarer than you think. So it's always a cool thing to think about.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, even like, not that we focus on value too much, but for something like that, knowing that I got a second copy of the Jalmerson for like $2 or something, I'm sure that if someone offered you a copy of the Enroth for like 20 or $30, you would be all over it.
Oh yeah, like that's an overpayment that I would not mind at all. Uh, just crazy. It's been on the want list for so long. Like I don't mind throwing $20 at a card like that. Who knows if you'll see another one, right? So it sounds strange for a card out of 100, but in this case, it's very true. So, oh man.
Yeah, definitely a tough one, but I think one day one will eventually turn up, just a matter of time. But yeah, being out of 100, it's definitely encouraging. It's not like you're trying to find something that's, a one of one, like some of the cards we've talked about, or even like out of five or something like the French back. Like they're out there, so I'm sure eventually one will probably show up. But who knows? It's been whatever 7 or 8 years, so we'll see what happens. But moving on to my number two, getting back on the one of one theme and back to the printing plate theme. This one is the Derek Whitmore 2011-2012 The Cup Ultimate Collection Yellow Printing Plate one of one. And similar to the Dezingle, that is because it is the last of the four printing plates for that card that I still need. I already have the black, cyan, and magenta, just need the yellow. And kind of what brings this one to an even further level, why it's number two for me, is because of all the cards that are on his checklist. I mean, I guess there are like European printing plates and like stuff like that that are just like crazy random, who even knows if they exist or not, that kind of thing. As far as like, quote unquote, like normal real cards, this is the only one of his that I do not have. He only had his Ultimate Collection rookie card. He had a Pinnacle rookie card. He had an Expo parallel out of five of the Pinnacle, and then he had these four printing plates. So that's all he has. And then like I said, he has all, some European stuff and a lot of team issued cards and stuff like that. But as far as his NHL cards, this is the only one that I do not have. So obviously being able to complete the rainbow of the printing plates would be awesome. And it's a one of one and all that. But knowing that that would then kind of finish the quote unquote official checklist for him would obviously be extremely cool. So have yet to see it. And who knows if I ever will. I mean, unfortunately with him, it's kind of one of those, someone might have it and just think, oh, whatever, I've never even heard of this guy. Like, it's probably not even worth trying to sell it because I'd probably only get like a few bucks for it or something. So, and that kind of goes back to some of, the Enroth stuff too. I mean, like the French back, the MVP gold script, it might be the case where someone has them and knows that they have them and they're just like, like it's $1 card. Is it worth the hassle? Probably not. So, as kind of just another factor that we kind of have working against us collecting kind of more, lesser known, obscure type of players like this. It can sometimes make finding those cards a lot more difficult. because not that McDavid was in the NHL in 14-15, but let's say even Crosby or Ovechkin. If someone got the gold script of Crosby or Ovechkin, they would probably be like, oh, sweet, a numbered parallel of Crosby or Ovechkin. Yeah, I'm going to sell that. Like, that's just a very natural thought because it has value. Whereas, our guys, it's like, yeah, whatever. Like, just throw it back in my box. So, yeah, I feel like that's probably the fate for a few of these cards that are on our list, but who knows? But yeah, for me, knowing that that would be like his last, NHL card that would complete the whole checklist for me, that would be obviously a really cool accomplishment. Even though it's obviously not very many cards, still being able to do it, given that there are 4 1-of-1s, would obviously be very, very cool for me. And hopefully one day, at the very least, I'll at least see it. 10 years later, still haven't even seen it. So we'll see. Maybe one day.
You and your Whitmore cards, it just really goes to show you, that you never really know who collects what. If you're out there, listener, and you have a box of cards, you're like, you know what, like I should sell some of those. And you come across some names, you're like, why would someone really want this? List it up anyway and just, see what happens because you never really know. And I mean, out of all the players in each product, only a handful are really worth tons of value. And the rest are just not as much value, but like for the most part, when it comes to like player collectors and stuff, same thing applies. The majority of player collectors collect people I would think of lesser value, or maybe they did have value at one point, but for the majority of their careers are lesser value than before. So you just never really know. I mean, if it's a rare card, chances are someone out there would need it. Just a matter of finding this person. Like I'm sure we've all seen this where, I mean, you guys can look at us, but I'm sure we've seen this where someone might show me their collection and, it might be my first interaction with this collector. And then they show me their collection of this guy who I didn't really think has a following at all, but let alone, boom, they show me their cards and it's like, wow, like I didn't know anyone collected this guy. That's really cool. So it might not be a big name or anything or someone who's still playing hockey, but it really shows that, there pretty much is a market for everybody, for every card. You just got to find it, right? So it's a very difficult thing to do, but chances are, if they need it, they'll definitely help you out with a cool sale. So yeah, I mean, those cards are, really alludes to that. And yeah, I'm certain you'll find it one day. And I should mention, for a guy who doesn't really collect printing plates, for 2 printing plates to be on your top 5, I mean, that's pretty cool. It shows just how much you need them, right? So yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm sure you'll track those down in no time.
Yeah, it is kind of funny because Jalmerson's my main guy, and I literally do not own a single one of his rookie printing plates.
See,
I
that's crazy.
don't own any of them.
Like, would you want them? Because I know like the rookie printing plate is a little bit different for you, but I mean, is it just not being able to find them, or maybe you passed up on them at the start, or maybe you just don't want them?
Yeah, so back then, back in 08, 09, I just didn't really have any interest in printing plates. So, like I didn't consider them to be cards. Like it was just like kind of like an oddball type of thing. And even to this day on my player collection checklist, I don't include printing plates. I just keep it as cards, like cardboard, which people can dispute. I know you don't agree with that yourself, but that's just how I've kind of always done it. It's kind of just like a nice little added bonus if I want them and can get them. But yeah, for Jalmerson, I have just never, was never really interested in them back then. And, I think they dried up pretty quickly back around then because I think really I've only seen, I think one of them probably in the last like 5 or 10 years. Like they're just not out there. I don't know who has them, but they're just, you never see them. So I
I
don't know.
bet
I
they're
mean,
hoarded somewhere. I
yeah,
mean,
they might be.
those early cup years, people broke a lot of that stuff. Like personally, broke a lot of that stuff, and just kept everything, right? So there was a lot of cup collectors back then before prices got insane. So it wouldn't surprise me if someone just hoarded them all, or just I don't know. I mean, like, would you want them now? Like if you saw them today, like, would you like think about grabbing them?
I might think about it. Yeah. I mean, it would probably, a lot of it would depend on the price. Like the one, I saw one a few months ago, or maybe like late 2021, something like that, somewhat recently, like within the last 6 months. And it went for, I want to say like $75 or something.
Ooh, that's too much.
And yeah, to me, it was like, okay, like if this had gone for like 30 or something, then like, sure. 75, no, like it's not worth that much money at all. So yeah, I don't know what happened there. I don't know what that was about. But yeah, I mean, if someone, presented me one, at a reasonable price, I might grab one just so I can say, yeah, I finally have one, like whatever. But yeah, I will never include those on my checklist or anything. But then, so that was 0809. Then you move forward to 1112 with Derek. At that point, it was just he's a friend of mine. I'm collecting his stuff, and he has very few cards.
Like you might as
So
well just go
yeah,
all out, right?
exactly.
100%, 100%.
Exactly. So that was the thought process there. And then fast forward to 1516 with Dzingel and Slavin. Dzingel only had the SP Authentic printing plates. So again, it was kind of a similar thought process there. And then Slavin, also kind of a similar thought process that he really didn't have too many cards during his rookie year. He was only in probably like, I want to say like 7 sets, maybe the ones that I listed earlier. And then he was also in Fleer Showcase and SPG Used. And I believe that's it. At least that's all I can think of immediately off the top of my head. So, only having printing plates from 5 different sets, it was kind of like, yeah, if I see him, cool, why not? Because you got to remember, I mean, yeah, a lot of people know about him, and he's been an all-star and stuff like that. He won the Lady Bing, all of that. But back in 1516, he was really a no-name rookie. I mean, he was as common as it got. No one knew who he was. He wasn't expected to do anything. So there just wasn't much of a market for his cards. I got a lot of those printing plates right around release for probably like 15-20 bucks each. Like they just didn't have much value because he was kind of a no name type of guy. And obviously now that's far from the case. I don't know exactly how much a printing plate like that Premier Auto that I was talking about at the top of the show would go for nowadays, but it's hard to say because they pretty much never show up because first of all, I have over half of them, as I alluded to, but yeah, they just don't show up, for a number of reasons at this point. So it's hard to say, but yeah, back then he was super cheap and didn't have that many cards. So I was just like, yep, like I'll grab him if I see him. Why not? So that's kind of how it transitioned into that. It's still to this day is not, oh, I got to have every possible thing. I'm going to collect OPG checklists with my guy's name on them. I'm not weird like that,
That's so funny. I just got that. I'm like, well, you know what? That's all right. That's all
but
right.
yeah. And like even just like miscellaneous printing plates, like I don't have, I'm trying to think, the only printing plates of Jalmerson I have are those cup printing plate booklets. Slavin, the only ones I have, I believe, are his rookie year ones and cup printing plate booklets. Dzingel, I think I have a couple like miscellaneous ones, like a compendium or something like that, just because it was like I got it for like $5 or whatever. Why not? But yeah, I still like they're not on my checklist. It's just if you grab them for cheap, sure, no biggie. But yeah, not something I actively chase for the most part. So yeah, just to answer that question. But yeah, and then one other thing that I did want to add too, I've always told myself in the context of this Whitmore plate that if I ever open a tin of the cup, it will be 2011-12 with the hopes of pulling that card.
Honestly, like after all these years, the odds won't be that bad to pull it. So I mean, you never really know. All right, moving on to number one on my list. It is another Jonas Enderle card. Wow, that just surprises me for sure. I'm sure a bunch of you guys too. It's from 2009-10. Artifacts. Love Artifacts. The Artifacts rookie black parallel. And some of these were autographed, some of these weren't in set. This one is autographed. And yeah, I don't have it. I've never seen a picture of one. I talked to a Enroth collector years ago, and I remember seeing on one of his old threads that he did have one. It was marked in green and stuff. And I've never seen a picture of it. So, I mean, according to him, he has one. I think he's out of the hobby now, and there's no way to really contact him. But, it's kind of a shame, but it is what it is. Had a pretty decent collection himself. And yeah, just Haven't seen one, with these artifacts parallels. I mean, they're really tough. Some are for artifacts is, a parallel nightmare, for player collectors. Just a bunch of parallels. I mean, I find them fun, but this one definitely has not been as fun. So hopefully I can snag it one day. But yeah, I mean, I haven't seen a picture of one or anything. So we'll see what happens. But it's over 10 years old now. So hopefully I can get it one of these years, and that'll be a really cool day when it happens.
Yeah, for sure. But, one thing to keep in mind too is that no matter how difficult it might seem or unlikely it might seem to get these cards down the road, let's not forget that not too long ago you had the Fleer Ultra Ice Medallion numbered out of 25 on
Yes.
your want list, and we all know what happened with that. So
Yeah.
you never know. Hopefully these will all eventually show up. And like we said, it's one thing, a one of one, either it shows up or it doesn't. But for these cards that have some sort of a print run, you'd like to think that eventually one of them will turn up. So hopefully they do. Like you said, I know that some of those artifacts parallels back in the day were really tough. I know for me with Jalmerson being the year before, the numbered out of 5 were actually gold spectrums. And similar to the other cards that I've talked about earlier, I had 2 copies of that, and I believe I sold one of them, I think around that first cup run that they went on. But yeah, never had a problem finding that. I quickly found his black, which was a one of one that year. The one that was tough for me was the silver spectrum out of 10 for whatever reason. That took quite a while to find, and finally found one. But yeah, so I can at least understand where you're coming from with that it's tough to find some of those parallels from around those years that, were just for whatever reason really strangely difficult to find. So hopefully you do find one day. Speaking of parallels from around those years, this is one that I know, Aaron, you can also appreciate because I believe you have one of these cards, not the one that I need, but of a player that you collect. So the one that is number one for me, and this has been probably my top one going back to pretty much when this card came out. It is Nicholas Jalmerson's 2008-2009 SP Game Used Platinum Spectrum one of one. And kind of like how I talked about with Slavin with those couple of cards, this is the only rookie year Jalmerson card that I do not have. And again, I've never seen the card, have no idea, maybe it's sitting in an unopened box somewhere, maybe someone in Europe has it. Who knows? I have no idea. Have never heard a peep about this card. And it's one of those that just it feels like you're never even going to find it, never going to hear anything about it, but who knows, maybe eventually it'll turn up. But yeah, I mean, obviously with Jalmerson kind of being my main guy, being the only rookie year card I don't have, that makes it really big in its own right. But, this tidbit too is something that I think makes it a little bit more special is, and this is something we've talked about before, but I just really like the design of those 0809 SP Game Used rookie cards. I loved the look of them, and specifically the parallel cards, and especially the more scarce parallel cards like the gold spectrum out of 10 and these platinum spectrum one of ones, just having like that rainbow, the brighter rainbow foil on those cards just really made these cards pop. So yeah, for me, if I could ever find this card, that would be like definitely one of the cornerstones of my Jalmerson collection for sure.
Yeah, I know the card that you're looking at. I still need that card from my Mike Mole collection, actually, 0809, that rookie year. I do have it for the Enroth collection, obviously a year later. Those cards are awesome. And yeah, just something about the those cards or that parallel in particular is just really, really nice. So I'm sure one day you'll track it down, but it's one of those ones where, it kind of haunts your dreams a little bit where, especially if it's a rookie year card, it's like, you follow this player's career from, their first year in the league to maybe their retirement. And it's like, okay, I've seen a lot of cards in their career. And it's like, there's some that I just can't find. And it drives you a little nuts, like who has it? Where is it? And just, you know, maybe I'll find a picture of one someday or something like that. It's so strange. So, I mean, just, yeah, like I feel your pain on that one for sure. Yeah, it's kind of the one scenario where, I guess I kind of like win that round of rare parallels that we each have, and then the other one still needs. So strange. But anyway, hopefully you can find it one day. I mean, it is a really cool card. and with a really cool name too. Like isn't it like the Gold Spectrum or something? One of one. I don't know. I just like that name.
Yeah, the platinum
Platinum
spectrum.
back.
Yep.
Yeah, just really cool name. So, I mean, I really hope you acquire that card for your collection, both because it's awesome and because the name is really sweet too. That does it for me. I'm not sure if you want to add anything about our top five list here, but other than that, I think you have some additional group break information to announce for those who haven't heard. So, Eric, I'm going to let you take that away and end off this episode 57.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as Aaron alluded to, just a little bit of a refresher in case you missed the last episode. We are going to do a group break for a box of 0304 Topps Pristine. And just for those that are not already familiar with it, it would be a team random, just because I think that's probably the most fair way to do it for a product like this, since there are a couple of huge teams and then a few teams that aren't quite as desirable. So just feel that randomizing it is probably just the most fair to everybody. Give everybody a shot at those really big cards of Fleury and Bergeron in particular. So it's cool in that regard that by getting in on it, you will at least have a chance at a huge card like that. And there are a number of reasons why you should get in on the break if you haven't already, but potentially one of the most intriguing, or one of the biggest positives for it is it's really really cheap for a group break. If you look at most group breaks nowadays for new products, whatever it might be, the cheapest that you're going to get into a group break is probably going to be like 40, 50, 60 bucks. Well, this break, now again, granted, it's just for one box. I understand it's not a case break, but 25 US per spot. Again, for a group break, that is extremely, extremely cheap. So if you are into group breaking, why not? It's really cheap. It's an awesome product, and you still have a chance at getting some really nice cards and potentially very, very valuable cards. So that's a good selling point on the break for sure. And if you've not watched episode 54, please go back and do that so that you can learn more about the product and see how special it truly is. It's a very unique product, but it's also, in my opinion, one of the nicest looking products for hockey that has literally ever been made. So there's a lot to like about it. Obviously, with it being such a scarce product, even at that time, if you guys haven't listened to episode 54, my calculations are there were a little over 6,000 boxes total that were made. So, for the context of a modern product being that scarce, it's just pretty unheard of. I mean, you just don't see mainstream licensed hobby products that are that scarce. Even products like the cup are more plentiful than that. So it was extremely scarce back then. Now it's like trying to find a needle in the haystack. That's why I was so excited to find the boxes that I did. And again, another thing too is back in 0304, group breaking really wasn't a thing. So this honestly could be the first and only time this product is ever group breaked. So if you want in on it, just even from that standpoint, that's a pretty cool reason to get in as well, kind of that historic factor to it. So there's a lot to like about it, for the history of it, for the cards themselves, whether that be, the base cards, the rookies, the parallels, the jerseys, the autographs, everything looks amazing. It's a beautiful product across the board. You will not find a bad looking card in the product. So yeah, it's an awesome product. And I really believe this is a great opportunity for everybody to get to enjoy a very, very unique, one of a kind type of product. So if you have not already grabbed a spot, please do. Again, it's pretty cheap for what it is. So if you are interested, please contact us as soon as possible to get your spot. And yeah, you can obviously do that through any of our social media platforms. And we'll see that and make sure we get you on the list. But kind of just recapping the countdown of our most wanted cards, kind of something else I thought about when I was thinking of this idea, like I alluded to, with your Ultra Ice Medallion, Aaron, is even with that card and then another card I think of being my Jalmerson Dominion Engravatures card. Those are both cards that we'd featured on our White Whale episode that we have since acquired for our collection. So I thought that doing this episode, highlighting those truly absolute most wanted cards for our collection would be really fun, because hopefully in a year or two or five, or however long it might be, we can go back and remember this episode and say, oh yeah, like I remember really wanting that card, and lo and behold, all these years later I got one. So I just figured that would be pretty fun. And like Aaron also said, We also wanted to take this opportunity to kind of turn the floor to you guys, at least on social media. Share those cards with us that are your most wanted cards. It's fun hearing those stories. Obviously, you might not be able to share, as thorough stories as we did with these cards on social media, just because you're kind of limited with space and stuff like that. But there's stories behind every card, why you want it, stuff like that. So we would love to hear those stories. And of course, then we can also be keeping an eye out for you guys too. So, the more eyes that are out there, obviously, the more likely it is that you're going to find the card that you want and need. So, yeah, if you guys have any of those super, super wanted cards for your collection that you just, for whatever reason, haven't seen or haven't been able to find or acquire, let us know. And we would love to hear it and would love to help with your quest to find those cards. So, like Aaron said, I think that pretty much is now going to wrap it up for the episode. As always, we do really appreciate you guys taking time to listen. Hopefully, you enjoyed it. Obviously, we love talking about cards and love talking about stuff related to our collection. So, episodes like this are a lot of fun for us and hopefully, allowed you guys to think about some cards that maybe you haven't thought of before, or at least, you can relate in some ways, one way or another to some or all of these cards. So with that, please be sure to follow us on social media so you can see all the cool stuff that we do and obviously be able to share your stories with us too, since we will love hearing that stuff. We can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Centerized Cardcast and on Twitter at Centerized CC. Please also be sure to subscribe to the show on your podcast platform of choice to make sure you never miss a future episode. Until next time on Centerized Cardcast, keep collecting those hockey cards.